Hello, I'm Morgana Evelyn, and I've been creating BG3 content for the past year. With over 100 successful honor runs and close to 2,000 hours, I get asked what my favorite builds are all the time, and in this video, I want to outline some powerful builds that I would personally use in a party in honor mode. Before I get into the actual builds, I'm going to open with a pretty hot take here. I think builds are irrelevant in honor mode. Oh, but Evelyn, what do you mean builds are irrelevant? Sweetie, I and many others have been in this game with almost every class, solo, and even solo at level 1. I don't say this to gloat, but to drive home the fact that builds really don't matter as much as your knowledge of the game does, and your ability to adapt and roll with the punches when the dice aren't on your side, especially in honor mode. But game-breaking builds are a lot of fun, and I love running them and pushing them to their limits. I have put together a short reference guide on these builds to make them easier for people to digest and follow along if they wish. You can find the link in the description if you're interested, but this is a much more in-depth talk about what these builds can do, how they work together, and why I like them personally. Being able to adapt to tricky situations and come out on top has a lot to do with how well you know your classes and the game. So hopefully talking through some of my thoughts and processes can help you gain some insight into your own playthroughs. There's no right or wrong way to play this game. This is just my personal, completely subjective opinion, and you can take away as much or as little as you wish. With all that being said, let's talk about the builds. We're going to go from lowest to highest damage output with the builds, starting with number 4, Ice Sorcerer. Ice Sorcerers deal phenomenal AoE damage. They have incredible crowd control, making enemies frozen or slip, making them miss their turn completely, or just removing their movement speed with Ray of Frost. Their resource use is quite economical, with their bread and butter being Ray of Frost, which is a cantrip and doesn't require a spell slot. Twin casting this cantrip for only 1 sorcery point and quicken for free, turning you into a serious ice machine gun. Did you know that the save for an enemy slipping is based on your spell save DC? Not even the biggest bads in the game can escape a goofy slip. Why this build specifically? I genuinely love ice spells, and seeing enemies explode en masse is just, alright, send it, baby. Fuck yeah. It's very simple to level up, as I like it as a mono class. All you need is 12 Draconic Sorcerer. Here are our standout spells for an Ice Sorcerer. Ray of Frost, a cantrip that deals 1d8 cold damage to an enemy and slows its move speed. This deals 2d8 damage at level 5, and with our Draconic Bloodline, our Elemental Affinity adds our Charisma modifier to the damage as well. When we reach level 10, this increases to a 3d8. As a cantrip, it is very economical, and don't let the damage fool you. If you have applied Wet for vulnerability, this damage easily doubles, and if you add in Encrusted with Frost Gear, you can easily make enemies frozen and miss their turn. Do not sleep on this cantrip. Ice Storm, a level 4 spell that deals 46 cold damage and 2d8 bludgeoning damage in a 6-meter radius. The radius on Ice Storm is huge. Any enemy that is unlucky to be alive has to roll a save on slipping to even do their turn. A crowd favorite for sure. Cone of Cold. It does a massive 8d8 cold damage with an additional 1d8 per spell level above 5. I deemed it the Ice Shotgun because the range is only 9 meters, but the wicked damage more than makes up for that shortcoming. Not many enemies in the game can survive a double barrel from a kitted up Ice Sorcerer. Autoluke's Freezing Sphere. Not necessarily learnt from an Ice Sorcerer. The scrolls are plentiful for this spell. It does 10d6 cold damage in a 6-meter AoE. I included it here because it's a seriously slept on spell, and it is worth you trying out. Like seriously. So what role does an Ice Sorcerer play in a party? I love running this build for a support role, mainly for the extended Greater Invis support, which gives me 20 turns to run around and turn the game into a real-time action RPG. Although a more common use for a sorcerer is to twin cast haste. An extra action to AC and more move speed is a massive boon. The AoE an Ice Sorcerer can provide in a big battle is really helpful. Ice surfaces really hinder the enemy, and the fact that slipping can make enemies miss their turn is very silly. The final thing which makes the Ice Sorcerer a good build for me is the disables. We briefly spoke about frozen enemies losing their turn, but how do we freeze them? Well, to trigger frozen, you have to wet and chill an enemy. Easiest to achieve through water bottles or create water and the cold equipment that I go deeper into in the Ice Sorcerer build guide. The last meta magic I often get from my Sorcerer is Heightened Spell, which gives the enemy disadvantage on a saving throw. Combine this with Hold Monster or Hold Person. This is a literal delete button for a boss. Oh, can I mention the spell save DC is so high, it can go through +10 of a legendary resistance. Yep, you gotta try this out sometime with high spell save DC gear. Does it work solo? I can see it working solo with alterations to the equipment to target survivability issues. Subscribe if you want to see me live stream it. However, I believe it's better in a team environment because to really see Sorcerer to its full potential relies on the wet condition for cold vulnerability. In summary, here are the pros and cons for a Sorcerer. The Ray of Frost machine gun deals a lot of damage and only requires sorcery points to fuel it. It has incredible AoE and battlefield control. Ice Sorcerers can make enemies skip the turn entirely. High spell save DC and Heightened Spell gives consistent Hold Person and Hold Monster late game, and no multi-classing makes it a simple build to level. The cons being it takes a while to have some impact, generally around level 6, so it's a pretty rough early game if I'm being honest. It's very reliant on gear for effectiveness, and it also relies on the wet status for maximum damage and frozen. Sorcerers are also quite squishy, often the target of enemy AI with its low AC, and if you're concentrating on a spell, it draws aggro. And finally, it's very long rest dependent, unless you use the infinite sorcery point or spell slot exploit. At number 3, we have the Battle Master Fighter. I love martials, and Fighter is such a strong class all the way to level 12 that it's easy to justify in any party setup. It's also so straightforward to play that it's very easy to recommend to any player. I prefer Battle Master for the additional options and the damage dice from maneuvers, giving them consistently high damage output. Fighters can get an insane number of attacks at endgame, but they're extremely strong all the way from early levels. I typically go with the Great Weapon Master archetype, but there are a lot of options for this class, especially if you want to avoid overlapping your gear with other party members. Why this build specifically? This is a simple monoclass build that is easy to level, has room for your choice of stat allocation, and is largely gear agnostic. Too many fancy words and magic effects for your items? Don't worry, just hand your fighter heavy armor and a big stick and start hitting things. It's really that simple. Pick your fighting style archetype at level 1. I like great weapon fighting because there are some really incredible two-handed weapons in the game that no one else in my party will be using. Action Surge gives us another action, so 1 additional attack up to level 4, 2 attacks up to level 10, and 3 attacks from level 11. Maneuvers are why I love this subclass. They're incredibly versatile and powerful, and most of them increase our damage output with the superiority die. I use Precision Attack for the times I really need to hit my enemy. Riposte is nice to kill an enemy when they miss me, and they generally do when you have high AC with your heavy armor. Trip Attack is my go-to because prone targets have disadvantage on their strength and dexterity saves, and they can't take any reactions. This is important in honor mode, as not being able to take reactions removes most of the legendary actions from play. All attacks made within 3 meters of a prone target are also made with advantage, making them much more vulnerable to being dogpiled for a swift death. Disarming attack I use occasionally, but mostly I just use it on Merkel for his scythe. Pushing attack is honestly great for yeeting people, but I personally love using it on Steel Watchers. For fates, I always take Alert. Going first in honor mode is critical to get control of combat and set up for the first round Nova. For the second feat, I would take Sharpshooter for a dex-based archery style fighter, or I would take Great Weapon Master for the bonus action attack on a crit or a kill, and for the flat +10 damage bonus. My third feat generally is Savage Attacker, increasing my damage output even more for no effort. For the final feat, I take Athlete if I'm not using gloves or elixir for the build, or Tough if I need the survivability. Fighters get a third attack at level 11, which is huge. With Mind Sanctuary, Haste, Terrasul, and Action Surge, you can easily one-turn Raphael. What role does a fighter have in a party? The fighter is best up front, dealing damage, tanking hits, or using their high AC and health full to bait out opportunity attacks and either setting up for the rest of your party to Nova or cleaning up stragglers after your hardest hitters have had their turn. I like giving the Doomhammer to my fighter to confront Merkel and trying to disarm his scythe. The Doomhammer applies Bone Shell, which stops him from healing when he eats necromites and deals magical bludgeoning damage, which Merkel is not resistant to. Fighter has enough flexibility and diversity that you really can do a different build and feel a different niche every time you play. I've honestly tried all 3 subclasses, but Battle Master is the one I go back to every time for its consistency, solid damage output, and battlefield options. Does this build work solo? This build is powerful enough to run solo even without Illithid powers. I did so on stream after patch 7 dropped and it was a lot of fun. Battle Master has enough flexibility and options for control, but also access to the heaviest armor and best weapons in the game that survivability is rarely an issue. So what are the pros and cons of a fighter? Well, the pros being fighter is strong from level 1 with huge power spikes early. It is simple and straightforward that any player can pick it up easily. There is almost no competition for gear. They are excellent for setting up your party or cleaning up after your first round Nova and can really fit any niche you need for your party. And the action economy is a bit nutty, and the cons being it really lacks AoE and a head empty kind of playstyle. And at number 2 we have the Tavern Brawler Monk. Monks deal massive single target damage, have insane action economy, and provide an unbelievable amount of battlefield control. There is no danger of fighting other party members for gear because you don't really need any at all to be effective. Their resources key points come back on a short rest, making them perfect candidates for potions of angelic reprieve if you want to keep pushing without long rests. I know many people like Astarion for this build because of the 1d10 necrotic damage in Act 3, but I personally hate waiting until endgame for a build to come online, so Karlach with her soul coins is my top pick for this build, and they add 1d4 fire damage to Karlach's punches. But just between you and me, they're kind of bugged and they actually do a 2d4 fire damage. So yeah, that's why I picked Karlach. Why this build specifically? I love martials, and the Tavern Brawler Monk has some of the best damage output and flexibility options in the game. I love having strong options to respond with, especially when the game's RNG goes completely against you and forces you to be out of your comfort zone. This is especially true in Honor mode, where you really have to roll with the punches and things can go wrong quickly. Unarmored movement gives me the range to lock down a large battlefield if I need to, with a massive buff to move speed and jump distance. Step of the Wind has 2 variations, dash and disengage. These are much better options for survivability, allowing you to spend a key point and bonus action to escape from danger. Both versions remove the bonus action requirement from jump. Flurry of Blows is great, but the open hand monk version that adds the ability to knock the target prone, remove their reaction, or push them away is what really makes this build shine. That, on top of the ridiculous damage from Tavern Brawler, makes the core of the build. Picking up Tavern Brawler adds our strength modifier twice to our unarmed attack and damage rolls, which is where our hit rate consistency and high damage output comes from, with a Hilljoin Elixir that's 21 strength with a +5 modifier. So we have a +10 to hit and a +10 to damage. Since Flurry hits twice, that's +20 damage, and all of this is accessible in Act 1. Stunning Strike is also the way we lock our opponents down, and it can't be overstated how powerful it is to simply delete the enemy's turn. The Manifestation passive damage ability gives us more flexibility and damage time, so we can respond to enemy resistances and vulnerabilities. The main one I use is Manifestation of Mind for psychic damage. Combine this with the Resonance Stone, which provides an aura that makes anyone vulnerable to psychic damage and receives disadvantage on mental saving throws, making them even more likely to fail the saves against our Stunning Strikes. Ornus of Body helps keep our key points from draining too quickly and improves our action economy for 3 rounds, perfect for longer fights with tougher enemies. Picking up the additional bonus action from Thief is huge for this build, as we have so many options available for our bonus action. Action Surge also gives us 2 more on-demand attacks, great for our already broken action economy. So what role does it play in a party? I love running the Monk as a mixed control and damage role. In the early game, the Monk's high dex will often keep them at the top of the initiative, making it easier for them to either set up stuns on hard targets or pick off a few smaller enemies, helping pull the action economy back in your favor very quickly. In the mid to late game, the damage output gets extremely high, and the number of options you have to use with the multiple bonus actions means that you are either straight up deleting enemies altogether or controlling them for multiple turns. Is this build different from the ones you see online? This build's slightly different compared to the typical Monk 9 and Rogue 3 or Monk 8 and Rogue 4. Typical builds try to aim for key resonance to add some AoE to their toolkit, or at least aim for evasion and the passive ability to ignore difficult terrain. The problem with that for me is that those things come to the build so late that I've already solved those issues, especially in a party. After hundreds of hours of playing and testing this build, I know that even playing solo, I prefer having those fighter levels for action surge for the harder in-game fights. Does this build work solo? This build is easily strong enough to run solo, but in the early game, it needs to solve the AC problem quickly. Monks have no native armor or shield proficiencies, so you'd be looking at racial traits to pick those up. Using armor and a shield is critical solo, but it does negate the additional move speed and the wisdom modifier to AC. But once your AC is high enough to be comfortable, it's very easy to bully everything in the game with this build, and I did it myself on stream not too long ago. So the pros and weaknesses of a monk. Let's start with the pros. Starting at level 1 with a bonus action attack is massive for any martial class. It is also one of the strongest classes in BG3 in terms of consistency, flexibility, control, and straight up damage per round. It bullies enemies hard with stuns, prones, and pushes. It also has absolutely zero gear requirement, and also bludgeoning damage is very rarely resisted in BG3, and their psychic damage passive alongside Resonant Stone Aura makes the damage really silly. And action economy for this build is nutty. The cons for this build being, this build is limited to single target damage. It is very reliant on elixirs, and this build relies on strength, dexterity, and wisdom, and melee characters all need constitution. Okay, before we get to our number 1 spot, here are some honorable mentions. The Bardodon, 10 Swords Bard and 2 Paladin. It's honestly the perfect build for honor mode. It's a good party face, incredible damage and control. I can't recommend this build enough. Holy fucking shit! The combat marshal with high-level spell science and smites is a force to be reckoned with. With the Mystic Scoundrel Ring, you can use your bonus action to cast Hold Person or Mass Command the battlefield for complete control. Yeah, the smites go really hard. A Sorcerer, which is a 6 Paladin and 6 Sorcerer. Unironically, this is my preferred support, purely to give me extended greater invisibility. It didn't make this list because it's only really viable in Act 3 with a lot of metagaming and meta magic. Act 3 is when the free cast strip exploit is possible. Infinite support spells and smites come at the cost of sorcery point manipulation. This allows me to do Act 2 and 3 without long resting. Pro Barbarian, which is 5 Berserker Barbarian, 4 Thief, and 3 Fighter. Another extremely powerful solo honor mode build. It's accessible from the start with Tavern Brawler with the Ring of Flinging and Returning Pike. Neurona in Act 3 feels like you're throwing a cruise missile. It's tanky, very strong, and highly recommended. Finally, we arrive at number 1, the infamous Stealth Archer. The Stealth Archer was one of the playstyles I meticulously playtested and innovated since BG3's release, and there is no stronger class for a solo honor mode run, in my honest opinion. The build, in a nutshell, is Gloomstalker 5, Assassin 4, Fighter 2, and War Cleric 1. And it is the cornerstone of my channel with a fully edited solo series, complete patch 7 walkthrough, and build guide. I put a lot of love into these videos, so please check them out. Okay, starting with the elephant in the room. Yes, you can range attack infinitely out of combat and roll greater invis to your heart's content with high stealth, but this is a turn-based game, right? Trust me, it's equally insane in turn-based combat with a 50 to 100 damage average in Act 1 and over 100 in Act 2 and a 4-digit Nova in Act 3. I love this build because I believe it has the strongest start out of all the builds early. Most of the challenge in honor mode is the early game struggle, and the Gloomstalker Ranger excels at early game. Level 1 gets you heavy armor proficiency, and you can leave the Nautiloid with 17 AC if you pick up Lazelle's armor. Level 2 gets you archery, which gives a +2 to range attack rolls, increasing our consistency by a lot. I believe the earliest breakpoint is level 3, where Gloomstalker subclass gives you a boost to initiative, movement, and an extra attack at level 3, and it only snowballs from here. Initiative and control of the turn order is literally everything in honor mode. Having the first turn allows you to set up your team, delete any danger before it gets to act. It is more important to me than being reactive to an enemy. Having access to 2 attacks at level 3, turn 1 makes a big difference early. This Dread Ambusher attack gives an extra 1d8 damage as well. Also at level 3, you get Dread Ambusher Hide, which completely breaks the enemy AI if you hide out of line of sight. They either skip their turn ignoring you or go to your last known location trying to find you, which is the reason why I don't really use Hunter's Mark that often, as my bonus action is taken up by Hide. Level 4 Sharpshooter is a great pick, giving a flat plus 10 damage at the cost of -5 to the attack rolls. You can mitigate this with Advantage, Bless, High Ground, Oil of Accuracy, Attacking from Hide, Prone, and many more. Honestly, if you watched my live streams and content, I'm super lazy, and I just have the Risky Ring equipped to mitigate this. If you have the Titan String at this point, you're already doing average just over 50 damage turn 1. Level 5, your turn 1 average goes over 75 damage. Throw in some items and damage modifiers, and you'll see triple figure numbers in late Act 1 and early Act 2. Pass Without Trace at level 5 is also a very pivotal spell, as it lasts until long rest and adds a flat plus 10 to stealth checks. Combined with greater invisibility and stealth gear, this pretty much allows you to turn BG3 into an action RPG. Greater Invis is somewhat complicated to explain, but to put simply, with Greater Invis, the first stealth check DC is 15, and the following is 17, increasing by 1 per check. With our gear, we should have a plus 25 to stealth, and advantage on rolls if you have a party. You are highly unlikely to fail your Greater Invis rolls, but like anything, there is a chance to. The next breakpoint for our build is level 8, where we get the Assassin subclass or our Rogue multi-class. This is huge because of 2 Assassin features. Assassin's Alacrity. You regain your action and bonus action back at the start of combat, and with the out of combat attacking, this is a godsend. If you do enter combat, you refresh your attack. Let me give an example. Let's say you manage to pull off 1 attack out of combat. We enter combat with 2 martial attacks and 1 Dread Ambusher attack. So far, that's 4 attacks. Let's say you had Bloodlust and get a kill. That's 5. Add another 1 if you have haste, 1 more if you have action surge, and another 1 for Terrasol. That is a Nova round of 8 attacks. Now, if you had Mind Sanctuary instead of haste and War Cleric, that is 10 attacks round 1. Another feature that pops Stealth Archer into broken territory is Assassinate Ambush. Attack rolls against a surprised creature is a guaranteed critical hit. This is absolutely insane. If you get proficient in proccing surprise round, which you will with a bit of practice, you will see 3-digit damage per attack with the correct gear. My record is about 250 damage, but that was without Psionic Overload and Resonant Stone shenanigans. Okay, it'll probably be fair if I give you some tips on how to proc a surprise round. Going invisible and attacking an enemy within its sight radius is very consistent. Weapon attacks outside of this range is pretty inconsistent. However, using bonus action abilities such as Hunter's Mark or Concentrated Blast does seem to work pretty well too. Our 2-level dip in Fighter gives us Action Surge, giving us a lot of setup potential. The defense with +1 AC is also really nice. For the final level, I either go 1 in War Cleric for the bonus action attack and guidance cantrip, or the Fighter subclass if I'm lazy. I do prefer Battle Master for the superiority die, increasing my damage. There is a lot of nuance with this build, which is why I keep coming back. It's mechanically complex and active with all the hotkey pressing and movement, especially when engaging the enemies and seeing how they react. You have to be active to get perfect results to turn it into an action RPG, which personally to me is fun for my ADHD coded brain. I did mention the hotkeys in my Stealth Archer guide, but let me know in the comments if you want a full-on mechanical breakdown on how to play it in a separate video. But here are the hotkeys. Control to see your bow range, Control click to hotkey attack, Shift to see the enemy sight radius, and C to crouch or sneak. Does the Stealth Archer work in a party or only solo? It works exceptionally well both in a party and solo. Although be warned, if you do take this build in a party, your Nova will leave all the enemies dead or a few stragglers remaining for your cleanup crew. What are the pros and cons of this build? The pros being it's very strong early game, which feels so good in honor mode. It has high initiative, high AC, high move speed, and 2 attacks from level 3, and the mobility from Enhanced Leap to travel around is honestly a vibe. The Nova Strike damage is unbelievable, with Assassin guaranteeing critical hits on surprised enemies. Most enemies will disappear on your first turn. There are many items in the game that increase your damage to absurd amounts. That being said, it's a very adaptable build for you to customize as you see fit, because the build is mainly about the playstyle. You don't want to be evil or want the barless armor. Well, you're proficient of heavy armor and have over 30 AC in Act 3. You don't like elixirs? Use the Club of Hill Giant Strength or use a different bow. You don't like ranger or special arrows? Okay, go on, be a swords bard, but at the expense of early game power. Okay, what are the cons for the build? Piercing damage is resisted by a few enemies in BG3, the most notable in Act 2 being Fizzabon, the Shambling Mound, and Merkel. You can counter these enemies with the Neomissa, a hand crossbow which is force damage, and the final con being gatekeeping elitists. This game has been out for over a year now, and the knowledge is catching up regarding builds and metas. Some people want to tell each other how to have fun, but I'll point out that we're all free to decide what's fun for ourselves. This build is my baby darling playstyle, and I'm proud of it. Sharing it with you all brings me so much joy, and seeing people have fun with it never fails to bring a smile to my face. Let me know in the comments what builds you can't live without in your honor party. I would love to hear about it. Remember that these separate builds are a template and an inspiration for you to take with you on your adventure. Change them however you like, as they're not absolute unless